Well, these live pictures coming out of KwaKhangelamankengane, of course, on this very important ceremony, King Misuzulu performing Ukungena Esibayeni ritual. Just to give you a sense of what that is about, loosely translated, you would say it is the entering of the kraal. It is one of the important procedures leading up to the official coronation of the AmaZulu King, and is, as one would say, the cattle kraal entering ceremony. Ukungena Esibayeni kweSilo is what many of you would know it as, a sacred rite performed in line with Zulu customs. It's traditionally one of the final customs, if I may, before the coronation itself. And of course, King-elect, or King Misuzulu, if we can in this instance, I recall having a conversation at some point with Dr. Ukungena Esibayeni, who's a cultural expert, who basically outlined how this particular ceremony would be taking place. We heard from our colleagues that are stationed there, apologies, we're still trying to get hold of them at this stage, that this is quite an important process within the AmaZulu culture, Ukungena Esibayeni, the entering of the kraal. And of course, this ceremony that is taking place also happens after Princess Magade had performed the same ritual the previous week. Basically, confusion reigning in that weekend. I think it was of the 13th of August. Yes, it was, when the opposing faction of the Misuzulu in the AmaZulu royal family held basically Ukungena Esibayeni, and that's of course entering the kraal. That had taken place at Entering Royal Palace, you would recall, traditionally basically crowning Princess Magade as the king of AmaZulu. So while the festivities are taking place there, those live pictures from Nongoma, you would know of course that in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, there is another application that is being made by two princesses. I'll give you the details of that very shortly. So you'd also recall that while all of this is taking place, a faction had also written to President Cyril Ramaphosa asking him to officially recognize the Smagate, this despite other members of the royal house and government officially recognizing his brother King Misuzulu as leader of the nation. You saw there just a short while ago the Zulu traditional Prime Minister Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi had also yesterday describing what we had seen a day before as well, the brothers of the late king also endorsing a third person as well to be king of the Zulu nation. And Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi yesterday in a press conference also saying it was quite bizarre for that to have taken place. If you take a look at what and how this royal feud itself had all unfolded, you would recall, of course, that it was on the 12th of March, culminating to this particular process that we're seeing now, Ukungena Esibayeni kweSilo, if we can put it that way. All of this coming now, of course, after on the 12th of March, you would recall, 2021, AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini had passed away in hospital. And soon after that, there'd been speculation. Of course, you see the Zulu maidens there also, live pictures, them also coming through. We also saw Mabuto much earlier on, also crucial aspects of this particular ceremony. So you would recall after King Goodwill Zwelithini Zulu had passed on, soon after that speculation had been rife on who, of course, will be next in the monarch. A lot of speculation, and what I can tell you at this stage, just in conversation as well with my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo, recall, while this ceremony is taking place, these live pictures, we do know that there is a matter that is before the courts at the moment. My colleague Ayanda Mhlongo is telling me just a few moments ago that lawyers are presenting their arguments. Now, arguments for what? you may ask. The AmaZulu princesses Thando Yenkosi Zulu as well as Ntombi Zosuthu Zulu Duma filing court papers to interdict King Misuzulu's pre-coronation ceremony, the one that you're seeing live on these pictures at the moment. And then that is also, they're basically wanting that done pending the outcome of the Supreme Court of Appeal application. On Friday, you would recall, the Supreme Court had granted the AmaZulu Queen Mngomezulu as well as her daughters, Princesses Thando Yenkosi Zulu, as well as Ntombi Zosuthu Zulu Duma, leave to appeal a Pietermaritzburg High Court ruling that earlier dismissed an application to half of the late King Zwelithini's estate. So while this is taking place, that is what is happening on this in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Our colleagues are there. If there's any outcome on that particular matter, we'll certainly let you know. But we do know is that the cameras certainly didn't have time to apply to get inside that particular court. But what my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo is telling me at the moment is that lawyers are presenting their arguments there. I'm not sure if I'm able to bring in my colleague who is joining us there, Simpiwe Makanya, as well. Simpiwe, are you able to hear me this afternoon? And what sense are you getting there? You said that the crucial aspect of the ceremony, Ukungena Esibayeni, is likely to take place at about 12 o'clock. All right. He's going to give us, well, we'll give him a few minutes. Our colleague is still trying to set up most of what, of course, he will tell us about what's expected, he said, to take place round about at midday today. Ukungena Esibayeni, the entering of the Kraal, one of the important procedures leading up to the official coronation of the AmaZulu King, is of course the cattle kraal entering ceremony, Ukungena Esibayeni kweSilo. You're going to hear quite a lot of that, of course it being a sacred rite performed in line with Zulu customs, and is traditionally one of the final customs before the coronation itself. Of course, this process not without its own challenges as well. Internally, you see on our screen there, papers filed, and my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo is telling me that that particular matter is, currently underway in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Royal feuds, not a new thing at all, as you would have heard from the professor that we had been speaking to a bit earlier on. And, the fight for the Zulu throne, certainly nothing new. For centuries, the ascendancy to the Zulu throne is quite a precarious undertaking that sometimes leads to prolonged disputes and even some open war. You would recall just a little bit of history here. King Shaka Senzangakhona, popularly recognized as the face and the heart of Zulu nationhood, was himself, a usurper who was killed, that the rightful heir prince, Sukujana ka Senzangakhona. You would recall some of history there. Shaka was himself murdered by his brothers, Princes Dingane and Mhlangana. If you go back in history, we talk about, some of the feuds related to this particular process. So almost 2 centuries later now, King Goodwill Zwelithini, who bore both King Misuzulu and Princess Makate, also facing their own challenges, taking up this throne, born into, if we can, a divided Zulu royal house. I don't think anyone would be accusing us of saying that, given the events that have taken place over the past 2 weeks, if I may, or so. So if you look at the timeline of this kind of feud, you would certainly see that born into divided Zulu royal house, when Zwelithini had become of age, the throne was occupied by his uncle, you would recall. That was, if my memory serves me well, the senior prince Israel Mngomezulu Solomon, if I'm not mistaken, who had been appointed regent after the death of King Bheki. So if you're asking who is Misuzulu, you're asking Misuzulu Sinqobile kaZwelithini. understand is born 1974, 23rd of September. He'll be celebrating next month. And he's the third oldest surviving son of King Goodwill Zwelithini Mngomezulu, and the first for his great wife, Queen Mantfombi Dlamini. Mantfombi, of course, you would recall, was the sister of Eswatini's king, Mswati III, and the daughter of King Sobhuza II. As she had also, of course, come from royalty, Queen Dlamini Zulu became the great wife. And unlike the king's other wife, her lobola, or the bride price, if I may, of about 300 cattle was paid for by the Zulu nation. So all these live pictures that you're seeing here taking place, KwaNongoma, which is of course the final parts before, of course, the coronation itself does take place. But of course, we know this High Court application that is taking place in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg. The first applicant being Princess Yenkosi Zulu, and the second applicant being Princess Ntomzosutu Zulu Duma. And this notice of motion, we understand, was filed today, and that matter is before the courts as we speak. Let's be joined now by SABC News, a reporter, Simpiwe Makanya, was live for us there. Simpiwe, lots of festivities, of course. You said the key aspect of the ceremony should be taking place at about midday. What can you tell us now?
Well, Criselda, what I can certainly tell our viewers is that we are seeing quite a lot of people making their way inside the KwaKhangelamankengane Royal Palace. In fact, as I speak to you, Criselda, at the entrance of the palace, we saw hundreds, if not thousands, of Amabutho converging there. And earlier on, we did also have an opportunity to interact with the AmaZulu traditional Prime Minister, that's Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who had just arrived at the palace a short while ago. And the sentiment really on the ground, Criselda, is that of excitement. You know, people that we have been interacting with since the early hours of this morning are saying that they are happy to be witnessing this historic event. And as of course it is happening, on the other hand, we've got this pending a court interdict that is going to be heard at the Pietermaritzburg High Court, where my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo is standing by to give us the latest developments in terms of that application that has been brought forward by the two princesses of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini. We are indeed continuing with the rolling coverage of what is happening here at KwaKhangelamankengane Royal Palace. Criselda, let me try and interact with some of the dignitaries who are here, some of the guests who are here. Baba sinibingelele sinamukele indabeni ni live ku SABC News njengamanje. Ake sibuze ukuthi nje lolu suku lanamhlanje lusho ukuthini kunina njengoZulu nihlangene nje la esigodlweni.
Mhlawumbe umsakazi ohloniphekile umthandeni lona kwaMagubane ematheni, ngihamba nenkosi uMaphumulo ebuya eMbumbulu. Lolu suku usuku esithi Zulu bonani, Zulu yamukelani ngonyama, Zulu yamukelani isilo senu, isilo sinye kwaZulu, uMisuzulu kaZwelithini, uMisuzulu ngonyama yamaZulu. Lolu suku sizoqinisekisa ukuthi singamaZulu sizothi bayede ngonyama, bayede hlanga lomhlabathi, bayede wena wendlovu, sisemva kwakho, siyingubo yakho. Amakhosi njoba ngisho ukuthi nginenkosi uMaphumulo la ebuya leMbumbulu ize la izofakazisa. Ngakho ke sithi bayede wena wendlovu, uwe wedwa inkosi yamakhosi ekhona nebusayo. Izizwe zonke namakhosi onke ayakhothama kuwe namhlanje athi bayede wena wendlovu, Zulu omnyama, Zulu ndlela zemhlophe, inye inkosi uMisuzulu.
njengoba kuqhubeka lo mdontsiswano okhona njengoba ngikhuluma nawe nje kunodaba olufakiwe lapha enkantolo ephakeme eMngongundlovu lokumisa wona lo msebenzi kufanele ngabe uyaqhubeka namhlanje. Hlasimbe nicabanga ukuthi yini ekufanele yenziwe ukuletha uzinzo nobumbano lapha eNdlunkulu?
Engingakusho ukuthi lokho esikubonayo wena weSilo akuqali akusethusi, ngakho ke kuzo subside into nje ezoshona phansi iphelele phansi izophela. Abakhula kulesikhathi samanje bathi amanzi amancane. Lokho kwenzakala noma kungakhona phela, khumbula msakazi ukuthi sikwidemocracy, yonke into eyenzakalayo sinelungelo lokuyenza. Umsindo khona sithi thina iwona msindo oqinisa isihlalo sobukhosi. Yingakho ke sila cha lokho khona eMaritzburg nakho kuzoxazuleka, ngoba akusho ukuthi asingabekwe iSilo noma asingabungazi lolu suku, ngoba iSilo vese siphi sisesihlalweni. Lokhu nje sizokwenza okunye kwesiko okumele sikwenze ukuba iSilo futhi singenile ebusuku besinaso ebusuku. Lokhu sizokhombisa umhlaba ukuthi iSilo singenile Esibayeni, okunye sizoqedela khona namhlanje.
Sibonga kakhulu ngesikhathi sakho, asingamvaleli ngaphandle uma sizwe naye uvo lwakhe uNdlunkulu ukuthi ngakube lolu suku ulithatha kanjani njengoba ke kuqhubeka kukhona ke lezimo ezikhona eNdlunkulu, kepha siyabona abantu baphuma enhlangothi zonke ukuzobungaza lolu suku olumqoka kangaka.
Hayi, njengoba esho nje ubaba uMagubane, into ezophela njengoba abukho ubukhosi obungabi nobubango bakhona, into ezodlula nje. Ingacabanga ukuthi ngathi iprocess eyela khona ekuthenini abonakala njengenkosi yamakhosi, njengeSilo esiphethe zonke izizwe lezi ezikhona KwaZulu-Natal.
Well, Criselda, those are just some of the sentiments on the ground here as we continue to bring you rolling coverage of all that is happening at KwaKhangelamankengane Royal Palace. I'm going to step out of the shot and ask my colleague Mpumelelo to give our viewers a sense of what is currently happening. I'm sure in your visuals you can see more and more people making their way inside the palace. Where we are stationed next to the marquee where the AmaZulu King Misuzulu is going to be addressing those who are in attendance here today to witness this event. But on the other hand of where we are is where you can see thousands of Amabuto who are busy chanting slogans, singing, saying Inye Inkosi. In other words, they are saying that there shouldn't be any form of confusion among the AmaZulu nation when it comes to the issue of who in fact is supposed to be on the throne of the AmaZulu nation. Of course, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, in his role as the AmaZulu traditional prime minister, has been saying that it's already too late for those who are disputing King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal as the rightful heir, because he is already effectively on the throne. On your visuals, Criselda, I'm sure my colleague Mpumelelo is giving you those visuals of Amachichi, the maidens who are continuing obviously to make their presence felt here at KwaKhangelamankengane Royal Palace. The scenes of excitement, the scenes of jubilation as these maidens are entering the palace, saying that they also want to be witnessing the history that is going to be unfolding today. Of course, you know that the former or the late AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini, was on the throne for about 50 years, being in charge of this very large nation of AmaZulu, Criselda. But the sentiments that have been expressed by those who are in attendance here, particularly the guests that we have just spoken to, they are saying that these types of disagreements, if one may call them that, are expected in a democratic country. They are expected, but they are of the view that when the dust settles, no one is going to be questioning who the rightful heir of the AmaZulu should be, or who the king of AmaZulu is, because everyone here seems to be in agreement that King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal is the rightful heir to the throne. We are also monitoring the developments at the palace where the king is expected to come out from, and we have our colleagues there who are stationed monitoring those developments on the other side of this palace, Griselda.
At about what time are we expecting if I may, the official ceremony to get underway? I think you said it was about midday, is it?
Precisely, Griselda. It was expected to start at about 11 a.m. this morning, but obviously, you know, there are delays. One would say perhaps because of the nature of an event such as this one, people coming from all walks of life, really, you know, to make their presence felt here. And of course, we don't know whether the developments that are happening at the Pietermaritzburg High Court do in fact have any, influence or bearing in terms of the delay that we are experiencing here. But I can certainly tell our viewers that as it is now, thousands of people have gathered here. Many of those who are here, Griselda, have already, taken their seats at that marquee where everything is going to be unfolding in terms of the address by King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal that is expected to come later on, after, of course, having gone or having entered Isibaya esikhona lapha, Griselda, esigodlweni KwaKhangelamankengane Royal Palace. Griselda.
Stay with us on the line, Simply. We're going to continue engaging with you. I also want to bring in Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. Prof, I hope you can hear me. A bit earlier on, I'm hearing my colleague basically telling us that he is not sure at this stage whether any of the delays that we're seeing KwaKhangelamankengane have got anything to do with this a court application in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, which my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo is attending. Could it be possible?
No, thank you very much, Griselda, and let's greet your viewers once again. No, Griselda, there are two processes that are happening here. The legal process should be allowed to take its course, and it shouldn't impact on the cultural practice that is currently underway. Similarly, the cultural practice should not be tampered with by these court processes. Because as Inkosi Mngomezulu said earlier on, and as the other official that was there also mentioned it, that is Mr. Makubane, we normally talk of, if there is a disaster, we talk of two processes. One is the rescue and recovery period, and then of course the other one which comes later on. Because in the first place, you are working on the assumption that there are people who are trapped and they need to be rescued, right? And then it's a rescue mission. But then after the incident has happened and there is no hope that anyone is a survivor, you then go there basically on a recovery mission to pick up the bodies. So I'm using this analogy to try and explain what is at stake here. The reality of the matter is King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal is now officially the king, given the fact that he entered the Kraal last night. So any court interdict will definitely not have any bearing on that particular incident. He's now currently the king of the Zulu nation. What might happen, that is of course, if the court rules in the favor of the two princesses, will be to then challenge someone who is already on the throne. Because the reality of the matter is King Misuzulu is now the king of the Zulu nation. So I think that they delayed for too long. What was supposed to have happened is that the day it was announced that King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal was going to enter the throne in the night before the 20th, they were supposed to have gone to court at that particular point and then seek a court interdict. To seek a court interdict at the 11th hour, after the king has officially entered the Kraal, I think it's basically acting after the incident has happened. That is the first key point. But then the second point is that, as you mentioned in our previous engagement, when we were saying that Princess Magate, in fact, entered the Kraal and there was no noise around that issue. The question is, why did the princesses not question that? And then the third issue, and the most important one, is that their going to court has nothing to do with King Misuzulu, but has everything to do with the will of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, to try and establish the extent to which the king's first wife has a case in saying that she wants 50% of whatever King Goodwill Zwelithini had. That is a different matter altogether, which has nothing to do with the event that is taking place today. So that's why I'm saying that the two processes should be seen as distinct processes, each of which has no impact on the other.
I want us to talk, Prof, a little bit about, the official recognition of kings and queens. I think it's done in terms of the Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act, if I'm not mistaken. Just talk to us a bit about that, if you can.
All right, my sister, thank you very much for making that point, which will take us back to the point we mentioned earlier on when we were saying that there are processes that are traditional in nature, and then there are processes that go in accordance with the current political situation, whereby we are governed by the current constitution of 1996. So the reality of the matter is, in the post-1994 period, whereby we now have a constitution, everything then has to be done in accordance with the law. And then we are referring to the 2003 Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act. You are absolutely right that in terms of that act, what is supposed to happen, and of course the KwaZulu-Natal equivalent of that particular act, which was passed in 2005. So in terms of the two pieces of legislation, what happens after the king has passed on is that the royal family meets, and then they nominate whoever is going to be the heir to the throne. Once they've satisfied those requirements, the minutes of the meeting are then given to the premier of the province, who will then look into the minutes and then check against the legislation. Once he has satisfied himself or herself, he will then contact the president, who will then also do his part in terms of preparing the certificate, which will be given to the king, who has been nominated by the family. But then what happens in that case is that you are having the legislative process that is running on its course, but then you're also having the traditional process that is running its course. What has happened in this case is that the family, the royal family, met and they nominated Misuzulu to be the next heir to the throne, and then they satisfied themselves. After that, they then contacted then Premier Sihle Zikalala to say, this is what the family has agreed on, and then following the legislation, then Premier Zikalala then asked them to furnish him with the minutes of the meeting of the royal family, which they did. And then looking at the two, then Premier Sihle Zikalala took the matter and then satisfied himself, after which then he contacted President Cyril Ramaphosa. So what then we see happening in Pietermaritzburg has nothing to do with that process, because basically it means that that process has to do with the will and not with the actual process which is followed in terms of legislation when it comes to deciding who the next king will be.
All right, we'll come back to you very shortly, Prof. Let me bring in my colleague, KwaKhangelamankengane Royal, who is still there with us. Simpiwe, I mean, talk to us about this sacred right. I understand it to be almost like the last of a pre-coronation. Talk to us about the sacred right of Ukungena Esibayeni, the entering of the Kraal.
Indeed, Griselda, well, after what is going to happen today, the only step that would be left for King Misuzulu Zwelithini would be for him to be awarded the certificate as it is expected during the coronation, which has not yet been announced in terms of the date. But as you are coming to us, Griselda, we are seeing more and more Amabutho and maidens making their way inside the palace. They've been coming in various groups from different areas across the province as well as the country, and we do of course know that some of those dignitaries that are going to be in attendance today are going to be coming from other African countries who are going to, be present at this crucial and quite historic, ceremony that is going to be undertaken by King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal. On your visuals, Griselda, are the maidens, young and old, coming in different numbers, making also their presence felt here at KwaKhangelamankengane Royal Palace. And when we engaged them earlier on, Griselda, as we have been speaking to different, stakeholders coming here, the sentiment on the ground is that of excitement. The sentiment on the ground is that of jubilation. They are saying it's quite historic for them to be here because they will tell even their great-grandchildren that they were present when an event of this nature actually took place to officially introduce King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal to the ancestors. And I'm going to ask my colleague Mpumelelo to give our viewers a sense of what is beginning to happen, where we are expecting that address to be made. In your visuals, you can see the maidens are already forming a line of some sort, basically giving an indication that any moment from now, proceedings will begin in earnest. Of course, on the other hand of the palace, we are waiting for King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal to exit the palace, where he will be accompanied by a strong crowd of Amabutho who are here, Griselda, in their thousands. And I can certainly tell you that according to the people who are responsible for organizing an event of this nature, they are saying that they are expecting about 30,000 people to be here. Of course, as that is happening, Griselda, we will also be keeping our viewers up to speed with what is happening at the Pietermaritzburg High Court, where that pending court interdict is going to be heard any minute. Griselda?
Prof, perhaps let me just bring you back in there once again. So talk us through this. So it's presumed that, this Ukungena Esibayeni, some had presumed amounts to the anointing of the king of the Zulu nation. However, this is not the case, is it? Instead, could this be seen as like a traditional prayer or ritual wishing the king well and basically declaring the people's loyalty to His Majesty the King? Would I be correct if I said that?
So, absolutely, Griselda, because we said earlier on that it's not all the Zulu kings that underwent this process of entering the Kraal or Ukungena Esibayeni. Not all of them did that. The most important part is that if you are a new king that is going to ascend to the throne, you must have the support of Amabutho. Maybe we can draw parallels with what happens when a new president is enthroned or ascends into the presidency. If you are a soldier, you pay allegiance to the current king, to the current president. So basically meaning that it doesn't matter as to who you support at heart, but then the fact that you are a soldier, you then support the president of the day. Similarly with Amabutho are the ones, in fact, who authenticate the presence of the new king. That is why even if you didn't enter the Kraal, but then if you were supported by Amabutho, and then the leader of Amabutho announced your presence, then you are now the king of that particular nation, in this case, the king of the Zulus. So then if you enter the Kraal, it's a plus, because it means that not only have you been introduced to Amabutho and the nation, but you have also been introduced to ancestors, basically pleading with them to give you the support that you need, but also those who are officiating in that particular event, interceding on your behalf with the ancestors, saying that here you are ascending to the throne, and you need their support for you to be able to lead their nation correctly. Because you recall that if you are a king, you are not just leading these people because they are your people, they are your ancestors' people. That is why the late King Kutulizolitini, used to say, Bantu Bakababa, meaning that my father's people. So as much as you are a king, you are not doing this job for yourself, but you are doing it on behalf of the ancestors. So Ukungena Esibayeni, therefore, is meant to make sure that whatever you are doing as the new king, you are basically doing it on behalf of your ancestors, and you are not going to derail from what they would have done had they lived to see the day.
I see some, what look to be some official cars arriving. I think Simpiwe, let's come back to you. I see some official cars arriving. KwaKhangelamankengane, do we know who that is perhaps?
We've seen quite a number of government ministers, Criselda, making their way inside the palace. Earlier on, we saw the Minister of Water and Sanitation, Senzo Mchunu, entering the palace. And prior to that, we saw the MEC for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in KwaZulu-Natal. That's the former Premier, Sihle Zikalala, also entering the palace. And there have been different government departments, and one in particular is also the minister in the presidency, who is also amongst the dignitaries who are in attendance here, Criselda, as more and more people obviously continue to make their way inside the KwaKhangelamankengane Royal Palace. But Criselda, to pick up from that conversation that you are having with the professor there, I suppose that another aspect that came out from the media briefing, which was held by the late King's brothers, that's Prince Mbonisi, leading that group 2 days ago, brought about the question of what then will happen once the king has been coronated, in trying really to, mend these broken relations that exist amongst the royal family. Those who held that media briefing, those princes who held the media briefing 2 days ago, were saying something to the effect that there is now a trust deficit amongst the royals of this very important family, Criselda, leading the AmaZulu nation. So it's going to be interesting to see how the king is going to approach the issue of the divisions. Of course, we have heard him quite a number of times in public speaking, saying that people should not be confused really as to who the rightful heir to the throne is, and that he is going to be the king of all the people that are under the AmaZulu nation, basically saying that the issue of unity is going to be paramount as he embarks on this very important role in the throne of AmaZulu nation. Criselda?
Prof, let me just bring you in on that point, on the issue of unity. I guess as this process gets underway, all eyes, of course, will be on the AmaZulu King, and to see how he'll be able to forge. These are not relations that need mending outside of his own home. It is right in front of him. So I think certainly how he deals with that will be very closely watched.
Criselda, if you are a leader, we don't see your leadership qualities when things are normal. Yeah. The only time we see if you are indeed a true leader is during times of trials like this one. So the onus is on King Misuzulu to make sure that after the dust has settled, as it were, he then embarks on a project to try and bring the Zulu royal family together. That will be his point of departure. Once the Zulu royal family is united, then the factions that are outside of the royal family will then follow suit. So in other words, unity amongst the Zulu people or the Zulu nation will be incumbent upon the members of the Zulu royal family coming together first, and the person to lead that process is King Misuzulu Gazwelithini, by virtue of the fact that he is now the king of the Zulu nation. He's like the father in a family. If there is confusion in the family, if there are squabbles in the family, the onus is on the father of the family to make sure that the family is united. So in this case, then it means that the king will have that responsibility. But obviously can't do it alone. That is why you also have the king's advisors who are saddled with the responsibility to advise the king. Just like you have your advisors to the president, your advisors to the ministers, the understanding is that two eyes are better than one. So in this case, as he embarks on the process of bringing unity in the family, the king will need all the support that he needs. And maybe let me bring in one crucial point, the role played by Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. I've heard people saying that he shouldn't be in the picture because he was there when King Zwelithini was there. The reality of the matter is King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal has just ascended to the throne, but he has not put together the team that he'll be working with. So which means then that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi remains the leader of working under the king until such time that Prince Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal appoints his own prime minister. So up to this point, Prince Buthelezi remains basically the prime minister, the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation, and then King Misuzulu will do his job. So I'm bringing Mangosuthu Buthelezi here for the same reason that I've just highlighted, that King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal will need all the advice he needs for him to be able to bring the family together. So among the people who will be assisting him in that regard is Prince Buthelezi. I'm not saying he's the only one, but because of his experience, one, on Zulu traditional issues, but two, by virtue of the fact that he is currently the Zulu traditional prime minister, he will have that responsibility to make sure that he assists the king in as much as he can.
And I think you correctly point out there, Prof, in terms of experience, because since the passing of King Goodwill Zwelithini Bheki Zulu, we then saw these divisions very much come to the fore. And he had very much been at the forefront of relaying to the public, you know, what exactly was going to happen next. There'd been much speculation as well prior to King Misuzulu about who would then ascend to the throne. He had to provide that kind of leadership. I'm talking about Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi here.
Yes, absolutely, Crisalda. And in fact, he had no choice. It's not as if he did this of his own volition. He had no choice by virtue of the fact that he's the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation until such time that King Misuzulu appoints his own. Then he has that responsibility. Whatever happens in the Zulu nation, it is him who has to be the link man between the royal family and us, the general public. That is why then the announcements that were made by him. Even when the will was read, he was there. So basically all the processes that were the build up to the planting of the king, that is Ukungena kweSilo, the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, he was visible. He was the one basically updating the nation, updating the media as to what the next step will be. He didn't do that just because he happens to be one of the princes. He did that because he's the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation. So it's his job. Anyone who will follow after him will have the same responsibility as the one who will be serving King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal. If, hypothetically speaking, if King Misuzulu decides that Prince Buthelezi should retain this position for some time, then it will be his choice, and he will not have violated any law. He will not be in contravention of any law because he will have followed whatever other predecessors have done. But then given Prince Mangosuthu's age, my advice will be, we would allow him to stay on the sideline and then be available to advise whoever will be taking this position, so that at least the handover and the transition be as smooth as possibly, as humanly possible. Because you don't want to rush the process and say you want to kick him out and then you bring someone new and then that's it. Because the newly appointed traditional prime minister will have to have a source of reference. And then if you know that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi is available to provide whatever advice, then that will ensure that there is a smooth transition, and then the Zulu nation can be united again, because this nation is known not just in South Africa alone, but across the African continent and the globe. So the skirmishes that we see happening are in fact taking us a few steps back, but then as others have just said, it's not something that should surprise us. It will die down and then we'll move on as a nation again.
Simpiwe, does it certainly look that way from where you are? The festivities, of course, continue. A very jovial mood, KwaKhangelamankengane, and many of the people that you have spoken to really not fazed by what's happening in Pietermaritzburg, but are basically saying they're basically there to support the ceremony that is taking place there today. I see maidens had been arriving a bit earlier on, as well as amabutho a bit early on as well.
Indeed, Griselda, if you may just allow us to briefly explain to our viewers what is happening, but also just indicate that we may have to leave this spot where we are so that we can go to the main entrance of the palace, where the king, I believe, is about to undertake that crucial historic, step in terms of entering the Kraal. But certainly that's been the view of those who are here, Griselda. They are unfazed, they remain unfazed by the court challenge that is pending, and also the other problems, where the problems of disunity that are facing the AmaZulu nation. They are saying that for them, that's not the issue. The issue is that they want to be here to witness history unfolding, because kubona ngesizulu bathi iyodwa inkosi Griselda, futhi ngaleyo ndlela ke there must not be any confusion.
Simpiwe, we're going to let you go. Prof, please stay with us just a little bit longer. We're going to allow Simpiwe Makhanya to get to the correct spot where we understand that process that we've been speaking about since this morning is probably about to get underway, according to my colleague Simpiwe Makhanya. And lisiko lokungena kwenkosi Esibayeni. So the entering of the Kraal is what this ceremony is that is taking place. Prof, you were saying a bit earlier on, it's not in times of, of peace that you get to see the strength of a leader, but in times where there is some sort of strife. But, those who are obviously KwaKhangelamankengane this morning or this afternoon, clearly, pledging that allegiance and support for King Misuzulu.
Yes, absolutely. They are pledging their support to King Misuzulu, because they are of the view that from a historical point of view and from a customary point of view, King Misuzulu is then the heir to the throne. That is why then they are unfazed by the court case that is pending in Pietermaritzburg, or that is underway in Pietermaritzburg. There is something that happened, I think I saw it yesterday. It might have happened before then, but I saw it yesterday, where someone was saying that if the king marries a queen from another another kingdom, so to speak, it mustn't be from outside the country. I don't know where that comes from, because historically, you may be from South Africa, in this case KwaZulu-Natal. You can get someone from Egypt if you want to, and then that person would be accorded the same status as you would have accorded someone who came from across the river, from another, a kingdom across the river. So the reality of the matter here is that the reason why people are unfazed by the court case in Pietermaritzburg is because they understand issues from a traditional point of view, and not necessarily from a legal point of view, because these legal processes have no bearing to the majority of South Africans, including the majority of those who are currently attending this event. They are saying that they didn't come to this event on a court case. They didn't come to this event because they were informed by the judiciary. They are going there because they are following tradition. So that is why anything and everything that happens outside of tradition does not make sense to them and does not matter. And that is why they remain unfazed, even while they are told that there is an ongoing case in Pietermaritzburg trying to basically stop this event. They are saying, no, the event is a different event.
Yes.
The will, and which is being contested in court, is a different event. So those two should be looked at from that perspective.
Talk to us about the significance of those who participate in this kind of ceremony. Of course, those who might not understand the culture, Amabutho, you've got the Zulu maidens as well, and others who are participating in the ceremony.
Amabutho, in fact, are the most important. I'm not saying that other factions or other groups are not, but Amabutho are the most important. As Obama Kubano was saying earlier on, if you are a king, you cannot be a king and lead the nation from a position of strength. if you don't have the support of AmaButho. So AmaButho should be the ones who are covering you, should be the ones who are protecting you. They are basically the pride of the nation, in the sense that in the event that the nation is attacked, those are the people who are going to defend the nation. In the event that the king is attacked, these are the people who are going to protect the king. So AmaButho then are the most important. That is why even those kings who never entered the Kraal, but they to make sure that they had the support of AmaButho for them to be able to lead the Zulu nation without fearing for their lives, because they had their support. So that is one of the most important groups that is basically gathered there. Then when it comes to the maidens, the Zulu maidens, those are the pride of the nation. We used to call them Izimbali Zesizwe. They are the flowers of the nation. Because if you have a nation and you don't have maidens, or you don't have girls that you can pride yourself with, then obviously it means that your dignity will be lowered a little bit. So that is why it's important that in an event like this, you have these maidens who are coming in their numbers to indicate that here we are the future of your nation, our Majesty the King, because they are basically saying, giving a silent message to the King that they are available, and they are going to make sure that the Zulu nation does not dissipate or doesn't die. Then you have women who are referred to as Isipitipiti, the group of women who are there. You cannot have AmaButho, you cannot have these maidens without also having these women who are attending the ceremony, because these are the mothers who are going to advise the young girls before they get married. And these are the women who are going to be the wives, or who are the wives of AmaButho, and who make sure that whenever they do service for the nation, for the king, they are there to give them all the support that they need. And whenever there are troubles, women are usually the most reliable people to try and reason with their husband. You can find that a husband is known to be a shrewd leader out there, but the moment he comes home and he sits down with his wife, then he takes a different identity altogether. So women are there to calm the situation. They are there to advise the youngsters, be they young men and young women. But the reality of the matter is, you do need women. So each and every group that is there for a reason, and they are part of the Zulu custom and the Zulu culture. You cannot pride yourself as a Zulu person, or as an African for that matter, if these groups are not there.
Very interesting indeed. And while we still wait I'm hearing from my colleagues in Pietermaritzburg, of course, where that court action is taking place. That is currently underway. Lawyers are still arguing in that particular matter. Our colleague Ayanda Mhlongo is at that particular area. And I'm not sure if you are watching the visuals on our screen at the moment, Prof. And I would appreciate it if you are able to just explain to us what is taking place there now.
What is supposed to be happening, which I think is happening right now, is that AmaButho are supposed to be positioned in a particular way, because one of the things that the Zulu nation is known for is order. Once the commander of AmaButho tells them what to do, they have to do exactly that. And then the leader of AmaButho, the commander of AmaButho, will then ordinarily be privy to the information that is happening inside, and then he will be relaying that information to AmaButho. When, for example, King Misuzulu is about to leave the Kraal, or is about to leave the palace, they should be taking a particular position and make sure that they flag Misuzulu so that he feels comfortable, he feels protected, and then shows to the world that he has their support. So I think that is what they should be doing, and which I think is happening at the moment.
All right, and the process of entering the Kraal, if we may, could you talk us through that?
This process of entering the Kraal, as I said, it happens in two phases. The first phase is a sacred one, which I said earlier on would have happened at night. That is how it should be done, in fact. And it's not everyone who is invited there. It's only certain people who have the right to enter that particular Kraal, and then where a white bull is slaughtered, and then they perform those particular activities behind closed doors, and the media is not allowed, the public is not allowed. It's a sacred moment. Thereafter, today, then we are going to see a public event where then the king will be basically appearing to the nation, appearing to the world, and then saying that officially he's entering the Kraal, and then he's basically indicating to everyone that even those with doubts will now know that he is the king of the Zulu nation. But as I said, there are two processes. The one is secret, and then the one is public. But the importance of it is as outlined earlier on, that you are basically praying to your ancestors, and we are linking the king to the ancestors, and want to make sure that and nothing is done that might in fact offend the ancestors, which might then lead to the nation failing to unite, which is the point we've just addressed, saying that after this event or after today's activities, the primary agenda of King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal will be to unite the nation. Because if things go wrong under his watch, then definitely the ancestors won't be happy with him, and then we might see a lot of things going the wrong way, simply because there is something untoward that happened on the day when he entered the Kraal.
King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal Ukungena Esibayeni is of course what is taking place. Those are live pictures coming out of Nongoma. We're still speaking to Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. You would know, of course, some details. The King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal being born in rural KwaZulu-Natal, moving to Eswatini when he was about 5, returning to South Africa at about the age of 11, and completing his school at St. Charles College in Pietermaritzburg. And I understand as part of a scholarship program of the Swazi royal family that sends family members and some ordinary Swazis to study overseas. King Misuzulu moved to the United States of America to further his studies. He stayed in America, I understand, for several years, volunteering at a Baptist church in Jacksonville and doing a lot of charity work on the continent, returning to South Africa at some point, I understand, after 10 years away. And at the urging of his father, we understand. Once back, he lived a largely anonymous life, if I can, as a businessman, of course, until the untimely passing of his father in March 2021. We also saw, Prof, if I can bring this in as well, the feud itself also reaching proportions where, aspersions are even cast on the character of someone. We've also seen that in the run-up to today's rituals. The character is very important when it comes to deciding who the king will be. Yesterday I was talking to some of your colleagues saying that the fact that you are the firstborn in the family is not a guarantee that you will be the heir to the throne. Character is very critical, more especially amongst the Zulu nation, because one of the things that the Zulus are known for, and not just defending themselves and then being brave, but they are also known for respect and for respect of their cultures as well. So if you are disrespectful, chances are you will not make it. Even if you are the firstborn, if you are disrespectful, you will then disqualify yourself as an heir to the throne. That is one thing. But then the second thing is that culturally, if I was saying to them that if you are left-handed, like me, for instance, you are then disqualified to be the heir to the throne. Because if you are left-handed, and then a cow has been slaughtered, and then you go there to cut the meat for the elderly, you cannot do so using your left hand because it's deemed disrespectful, even though it's your hand. So you might then ask someone to do that on your behalf. So there are certain things and there are certain cultural practices that we need to follow, and respect is one of them. And then if you are not respectful, then it means that you are going to lose on a number of opportunities. In this case, maybe let's talk to the point we mentioned about Misuzulu growing up outside South Africa. That should not come as a surprise, because under normal circumstances, the king-elect will not ordinarily grow amongst his people. And that is, first of all, to protect him from any potential enemies, and then he comes back at the right time to assume the throne. That is one thing that happens. And then, of course, the point you mentioned about links between him and Eswatini, that one also is not surprising, because his mother, the late Queen Mngomezulu, comes from Eswatini,
and then, of course, that is why most of the things that happen also link us with Eswatini. Even when the will was read, you recall that when there was commotion, Eswatini, King Mswati III, dispatched a regiment to come and protect his nephew, and he had the right to do so. But unfortunately, other people looked at it from an international relations perspective, asking the question, how possible is it that you can have warriors from another country going to another country to protect someone who's related to King Misuzulu? So there is a discussion for another day. The reality of the matter is, it grew up away from South Africa for a reason, and then, of course, here to do the kinds of activities we just referred to, assisting, volunteering, doing all of that. Because if you are going to be the king, you must be seen to have the love for the people, and also must be seen visible, trying to do things for others. You must be empathetic if you are going to be a leader. If you are basically pushing your own self-interest, people say you are egocentric, then you can't be a good leader, because it means you think about yourself and you don't think about other people. How are you going to lead them if you don't feel their sufferings, and if you also think for them as well? So those are the kinds of context that we can bring forth to try and understand this.
Prof, I think you were saying that being the firstborn, you've just said so much, it does not guarantee that you would ascend to the throne. Princess Makate Jackson Zulu is the firstborn son of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, but born out of wedlock. And he is from the KwaKhangelamankengane Palace. Talk to us a bit about these dynamics.
Okay, you are right. Princess Makate is the firstborn son of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini. There is no debate about that.
Yes.
History is out there for everyone to know. Now, there is this Zulu custom which is called Ukungena Esibayeni, basically meaning placing the baby in the womb. What happened, because Princess Makate was born before King Zwelithini got married, then he had to be brought into the family. And then the best way to do that was to invoke that Zulu custom of Ukungena Esibayeni. And that is what happened. And then when Queen Manfombi married King Goodwill Zwelithini, Princess Makate was then placed in Queen Manfombi's womb. So in other words, Princess Makate was given to Queen Manfombi as her son. So therefore, it didn't change the fact that Princess Makate is the firstborn. Okay, so basically then, for those who are arguing that by virtue of being the firstborn, you are then the heir to the throne, they are using that as a justification. They are saying that it's true that he was born out of the wedlock, but it's also true that through this process of Ukungena Esibayeni, he then became part of the family, and therefore he should be the heir to the throne. It doesn't work like that. He is the firstborn of the late king, and there is no debate about that, but that alone is not enough to make him king. I'm not basically entertaining the internal squabbles, I'm just explaining it from a Zulu customary practice. Then the second point is that if for you to be the king, they look at how you were born. In this case, who is your mother and where does your mother come from? Queen Manfombi comes from Eswatini, so in other words, she is of royalty. And then King Misuzulu was born by Manfombi, and therefore she has two royal bloods, if I were to put it that way. You have the Swati royal blood, and then you have the Zulu royal blood. So therefore, it means that even if, hypothetically speaking, Queen Manfombi was queen number 15, for argument's sake, and there were others up to 14, she will then automatically pass the queue and become number 1 as the bearer of the heir to the throne. Then if there are two queens, both of whom come from royalty, then other issues will kick in, and then they'll look at those dynamics. But in this case, when ilobolo, people normally refer to this as lobola. Lobola is a verb. When ilobolo, that is the bride price, when it was paid for Queen Manfombi, the cows or the cattle did not all come from King Zwelithini, but they were collected from the nation. So which means that Queen Manfombi then became the mother of the Zulu nation and the bearer of the heir to the throne. So looking at it from that cultural practice, then that is why earlier on you had people saying that they are unfazed by any legal matter, because from a cultural point of view, they know how we've arrived to where we are right now. So those are the dynamics that people are considering when they are saying that King Misuzulu is the rightful heir to the throne, without necessarily dismissing the fact that Princess Makate is indeed the firstborn son of the late King Zwelithini kaBheki Zulu.
I want to come back to, is it King Buzabazi? It's, a name that also came up. Prince Buzabazi, he is the fourth son of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, with Queen Buhle Kamate. That is a name that also came up. We saw that press conference by the brothers of the late king, basically backing him. And it shows the closeness, I guess, of how close this feud is to King Misuzulu, where you have the brothers of the late king endorsing someone else, basically.
That one is very confusing, my sister, let me tell you. It's very confusing for a number of reasons. One, why did they wait for this long? When did King Zwelithini pass on? And when was he planted? And after all the activities had taken place, basically meaning that we are now cleansing the Zulu royal house, we are cleansing the palaces and all of that, why did they remain mum until the very last moment? Where were they when the name of Mrs. Zulu was suggested? When were they when the name of Prince Makate was suggested? And why did they wait until this point? I saw their media briefing and they were saying that everything that happens has to happen through them. Anything that has happened outside where they are is immaterial. Now the question is, if that was the case, why did they keep quiet when everything else was happening? Because ordinarily, if indeed what they were saying was correct, they were supposed to stop this whole thing from happening. That is one point. But then the second point is, you have Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who has been visible throughout. If he was out of line, why didn't they bring him to order, if indeed their argument has basis? So those are some of the questions that we are raising. And then if they are saying that Prince Buzabazi is the rightful heir to the throne, the question then becomes, when did they have that royal family meeting wherein they nominated him? And then if they had the meeting, did they compile the minutes of that meeting? And then did they submit the minutes to the Premier of the province? And did the Premier submit the same to the President? Those are some of the questions that one will have to ask before we arrive at any conclusion. But for me, the main point of contention here is that they waited until very late, and then only now are they suggesting that Prince Buzabazi is the rightful heir to the throne, and they've not assembled the entire royal family to make that announcement. We saw it in the media, and that is something that is unprecedented and unprocedural as far as I'm concerned.
Prof, so any minute now, I guess, where we should see the entering of the Kraal, any minute now, by your predictions, perhaps?
Yeah, it's just that there are delays, my sister. From the time that we're given, the King Misuzulu is supposed to have surfaced now to see the public, but that has not happened. So I think there are some delays here and there, as you'd expect, of course, given the number of dignitaries that are attending, and also given the number of other technicalities that have to be attended to, and also given the fact that the regiments did not come as one group, and of course the maidens did not come in one bus, so they've been coming in bits and pieces. So you are allowing that process to happen so that there isn't too much commotion that happens when the king emerges to greet his people and then to greet the nation. So I think those are some of the factors that might be behind the delays. Not, of course, undermining the fact that, that some might be saying, let's wait and hear what happens in Pietermaritzburg, so that whatever we're doing, we are doing it without necessarily having to worry about anything else. But as I said earlier on, for me,
I just want to update our viewers on that. I beg your pardon, Prof. I'll come back to you just very shortly on that court action. Of course, the first applicant in that matter, Princess Nkosi Zulu and Princess Ntobizosuthu Zulu Duma. She's the second applicant, and the respondents being Prince or being Misuzulu himself, as well as Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the members of the royal family, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as the President of the Republic of South Africa, the President of the country. So I understand that President Ramaphosa's legal representative, Advocate Morane, has arrived in court. My colleague Ayanda Mhlongo just sending me that from inside court. Talk to us about what we're seeing on our screen at the moment, Prof, the significance of, from where I am, that looks to be a bull, is it?
It could be. I can't see it from where I can see the commotion there. Yeah, I can see people moving around. But even if there is a bull, that will serve a different purpose. Like I was saying, that the bull that is the most important is the white bull that would have been slaughtered at night when King Misuzulu entered the Kraal. In the sacred, that sacred ceremony. They might still have a bull today, but it will serve a different purpose altogether. And then the head of cattle that will be slaughtered also serve a different purpose. It's just to feed the multitudes of people who are there, and has no cultural significance really. It's just a matter of feeding the people who are there, because one of the things that Zulus are known for is that if you have visitors, it's considered un-Zulu, if I were to coin that word, for those people to come and live on empty stomachs. We are supposed to feed them because they are your guests. So ordinarily then, if there is an event of this nature, you will see a number of cattle being slaughtered. And by the way, Amakosi and Izinduna ordinarily would have donated cows as well, because that is how it is done. If there is an event happening at the royal house, then we'll have Amakosi who pay allegiance to the king, also bringing cattle to that particular event, because you cannot expect the king to be the only one feeding the nation. If you give those cows or cattle to the king, you are giving them to your father, so it will be able to feed the nation. Yeah, I can see the car passing by there with a bull or with some cattle. So that would be part of the process, and it happens throughout whenever there is an event, including when these maidens converge at Enyogeni. They always have enough to eat, because that is part of the Zulu customary practice.
And my colleague is telling me at the moment, we may seem to have been experiencing some technical problems, KwaKhangelamankengane, but I'm hearing from one of my editors here that the king has already entered the Kraal. If this is indeed so, we'll try to get that from our colleagues on the ground. That, of course, being a very significant moment, Prof.
Yes, it would be very significant as phase 2 of the process, because then whatever you would have done at night, you are now saying to the public, indeed, here is the king, King Misuzulu Gazolitini, and then we see him entering the Kraal, and then which means that now even those who had doubts, they would now know that he is officially the king of the Zulus. And I must just backtrack here and say he was already the king, because he had been accorded that status already. The issue of the president giving him the certificate is just a government process, which in fact has very little bearing on him being recognized as the king of the Zulu nation. So he's already addressed as such, and you might have seen him also addressing some gatherings in that capacity as the king of the Zulu nation. But this one is also very significant, because then all those people who have converged there from South Africa and abroad will now have witnessed King Misuzulu Gazolitini entering the Kraal, and they will go back and say, yes, indeed, we were there and we saw it happening. And those who are coming from Eswatini will also be in a position to report back to King Mswati III that indeed your nephew has fulfilled all the cultural practices, Zulu cultural practices, and then he is now officially on the throne of the Zulu nation, even though he was already there before this event happened. Last night's event and today's event as well.
We'll try to establish a connection with our colleagues that are there, KwaKhangelamankengane. of course, as this historic moment, of course, gets underway. Those few steps that will be taken before, of course, the coronation itself. And let's just fast forward a little bit to Prof. And then what are we likely to see with the coronation itself?
In fact, Crisalda, it's not a coronation in the Western sense.
In the sense, yes.
Because, the way coronation is conducted in the Western sense is that you will see someone presiding over the event, and then you will see this mantra being given to him that you are now officially the king, and then you will see the certificate being given to him. It's not something like that, because this is a Zulu cultural practice. The court case that is in Pietermaritzburg is basically trying to prevent the Western enthronement from happening, which is where then we'll be seeing the kinds of things that I'm just talking about happening. In this case, this one is not necessarily a coronation, because as far as Zulus are concerned, like I was saying earlier on, King Misuzulu is already the king of the Zulu nation because of the processes that have unfolded from the time he was nominated, not through the will, by the way, through the family meeting where his name came up, where he was nominated. You will recall that when Judge Mamadondo gave his verdict of the matter, or judgment on the matter, he indicated that there are two processes. The one process is where people, or some members of the royal family, including the princesses, the two princesses which I just referred to earlier, are basically contesting the authenticity of the will. That is something different. And he was saying that at that time, as far as was concerned, there was no other contender to the throne, because he was basing that on the minutes of the royal family where Misuzulu's name was nominated when he was a prince at that time. Prince Misuzulu Gazolitini's name was suggested, and then the family meeting met, suggested his name. They agreed that he should be the heir to the throne, and the minutes were then compiled and they were given to the prim. So that process is a different process. What we see happening in court, I'm even worried because we seem to be conflating issues here. For instance, as far as I'm concerned, I don't even understand why it was necessary for the legal team of the president to go to Pietermaritzburg as the matter is being heard. Because the issue has nothing to do with the fact that Prince Misuzulu is entering the Kraal. But it has everything to do with the possessions of the late king, King Zwelithini, whereby Madlamini or Queen Madlamini is saying that I married the king, the late king, through the Western way, or the Western marriage, or customary marriage. So basically, I'm entitled to 50% of whatever he had. Then the other wives or the other queens can then divide the other 50%. That's basically the bone of contention, which I think has nothing to do with the issue, with the customary practice that we're having today.
And obviously how all of this unfolds after all the pomp and ceremony, of course, is done, is going to be very telling if King Misuzulu will be able to unite AmaZulu.
Absolutely. Like we're saying earlier on, that that is when we're going to establish if indeed his leadership dexterity can pass the test of time. Because when things are normal, then of course you and I can be leaders without any problem. But when crunch time comes, that is when we need a good leadership. I'll give one example. When Chris Hani was assassinated in 1993, if we didn't have a person of Mandela's caliber, this country would have descended into chaos. So he came out as a leader, and then he showed leadership prowess, and then he addressed the nation, and he calmed people down and said, no, despite everything that has happened, in the name of Chris Hani, let us accelerate the process of moving to the new political dispensation. And that is what happened. Had we had a leader who used emotions as opposed to brains, this country would have descended into chaos. That is when you see a leader then coming up as a true leader. So in this case then, the royal family is divided to the core. That is the reality. That is why You have 3 names being suggested, to all of whom are said to be the heir to the throne or the rightful heirs to the throne, which is not basically something that is supposed to be happening, but it is happening. And then whatever divisions that are in the royal house also transcend outside the boundaries of the royal family, and then the nation also gets divided. Some political parties also get involved, and so on and so forth. So once the dust is settled down, then the onus will be on King Misuzulu to say, after everything is said and done, we are one nation first and foremost. Let's look at the impact of whatever we do, be it a positive impact or negative impact. If, for example, we remain divided as the royal family, how is the Zulu nation going to be looked at? And how is South Africa going to be looked at? And so on and so forth. So the questions that we will ask and then the actions that we will take will determine the way forward. So that is why then I'm saying that his leadership will be tested not by him ascending to the throne and successfully so, but by him being able to unite the nation. You saw what the late king did. Whenever there were trying moments, he would address the nation once, and then whatever noise that was there would die down. So we would expect the same of King Misuzulu, who is now ascended the throne, that as a leader, whatever he says, after having, of course, solicited advice from the elders of the nation, including the traditional prime minister and others, then that should be in a position to unite the Zulu nation. Failing which, then of course, if the nation remains divided, he will be the one to blame.
Let me, I think, drink some water, Prof. You said quite a mouthful. I must say, I'm in for a good history lesson here this afternoon as well. Thank you very much. Please stay with us. Simphiwe Makhanya, you're on the ground. What's happening where you are now?
Griselda, we continue to monitor the developments here at KwaKhangelamankengane Royal Palace. What I can tell our viewers is that as I speak to you, Griselda, the thousands of people who are converged have already taken their seats, many of them inside that white marquee, which is in front of me, expecting, of course, the proceedings to be completed at Esibayeni, where the king is currently at. He's being flanked by thousands of Amabutho, Griselda. It's even difficult to move around the area. And the issue of the signal is also a problem where we are. But we can certainly inform our viewers that proceedings are underway here. We are expecting the king to be making his way inside the marquee when the proceedings that are being conducted at the Kraal are finished, and then the king as well as the Amabutho will be making their way inside the marquee where we are at, Griselda.
Any indication when this will happen? A massive delay here. You were saying to me a bit earlier on, you're not sure whether part of the delays are as a result of some of these other technical issues that are underway in Pietermaritzburg. My colleague Ayanda Mshongo is there. Your colleague, Advocate Maruma Moerane SC, we understand to be representing the president. He's arrived at that court, I understand. My colleague who is in Pietermaritzburg telling us that. But do we have any indication when that significant moment will be?
Precisely, Griselda, the proceedings are in earnest as I speak to you. The king is inside the Kraal as I speak. That will, what time the address will be dependent on what time that part of the ceremony is finished. But as you can imagine, the number of people who are here, things are moving quite slowly because of the huge number of people who are in attendance here at Griselda. Maybe just to pick up from what the Prof was saying about the task now that lies ahead for King Misuzulu as he ascends to the throne, the issue of the divisions within the royal family. You know, when they have been making these parallel statements, if one may call them that, about the issue of the succession, you get a sense that really it will take quite a lot of work from all the stakeholders who are involved in this, in trying to bring about, stability one, and also the issue of unity when we look at what is unfolding before us. And I suppose that the test will be on how King Misuzulu KwaZulu handles the affairs and the current, tensions that are before, the royal family as we speak. Griselda?
All right, Simpiwe, we're going to have to let you go there. We'll bring in our colleague Bongani Gema, who is also part of the proceedings there today. Bongani is joining me now, but just a quick update that I'm getting from my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo, who is at the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Remember that I did indicate that one of the fifth respondent in the court action in Pietermaritzburg is President Cyril Ramaphosa. So President Cyril Ramaphosa's legal representative, Advocate Maruma Morane SC, basically argued that there's no urgency in this application that has been brought. He says that it's a self-created urgency on the part of the applicants. The applicants, of course, in this particular matter, being Princess Yenkosi Zulu and Princess Ntombizosuthu Zulu Duma. So the legal representative for President Cyril Ramaphosa, Advocate Mwerani SC, telling the court that the president was not properly served as well, I understand. And he's asked the court to dismiss the matter with costs. He says that the president was made aware of the interdict via a third party, and that Mwerani SC basically told the court that the king had already entered the Kraal. The legal representatives for the other respondents also asking the court to dismiss the application, saying there is no urgency at this particular point. The lawyer for the applicants also want the court to interdict the premier so that no more public funds are used. So it seems to be a lot that is coming out of this particular matter inside the Pietermaritzburg High Court. I appreciate my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo inside court updating us on this. Unfortunately, we do not have cameras inside that particular courtroom. Bongani Kema, you are still KwaKhangelamankengane. Has the king entered the Kraal? What is the situation? Bongani, let's come to you. Good afternoon once again. Has the king entered the Kraal?
But there is a secluded area that has been built inside the Kraal for the king when he does enter the Kraal. That's where we go, where the ritual that is going to be done close to the public is going to be carried out. So the public, yes, we are inside the Kraal along with the regiment. They are busy singing hymns here as we speak because they are a very important part of today's proceedings. But there is a secluded area, as I said, where the king is going to enter with elder members of the royal household and other trusted subjects, where he then undergo a certain ritual that we as the public are not open to see. And then after this, that we know that he will come out, where then pledge is also going to be made to the king. We understand that there won't be much speaking here today, so it will only just be pledging their support to the king, and then some dancing and hymns that are going to be sung here today.
Bongani, you'll forgive me, I did not get your words right in the beginning. I heard you say that you were inside the Kraal with the regiments. I couldn't hear if you said that the king had entered the Kraal. Has the king entered the Kraal?
Yes, because I'm saying we are inside the Kraal. We are awaiting the king to come inside the Kraal. As we speak, the regiments are also inside the Kraal singing hymns, awaiting the king's arrival. There is a secluded area that is built inside the Kraal. So the way we understand the king, when he does come into the Kraal, he then go into that space where a secret ritual is going to be undertaken, where the king, elder members of the royal household and his trusted subjects will undergo, and then afterwards you understand that the king will then come out, where then pledges are going to be declared by the people gathered here, mostly AmaKhosi and his regiment pledging their loyalty to the king. We also know that we were told actually that there won't be much speeches going on today. I think the most important part of today's proceeding, or inside the crowd, is the hymns that are currently being sung here, which have a huge significance. I mean, we are told that many of them go back even to the time of King, Shaka. That's when, they came about.
Bongani, if you could walk us through the process. The regiments are inside the kraal. You're awaiting the arrival of the king. Talk us through what happens then.
Well, I mean, different there are regiments here, males. There are also maidens. They are also seated here, and all the elderly women here who are also seated here. They're all singing. I mean, notably, I've seen the regiment from the kingdom of Eswatini who are also participating, taking part in the singing of the Zulu hymn. So I think the spirit is very high among the people who did come here to be part of this gathering. But this is the waiting now. We're waiting for the king to come in. I saw a chair being brought inside the crowd, and the huge police contingent is also inside the crowd. I can see as we speak, they are trying to build, a wall for when he comes in, there will be his protective wall.
And Bongani, with of course, where all of this is taking place, it shouldn't be a very lengthy a process, should it?
Sorry to say that, please come again.
It shouldn't be a very lengthy process, is it?
Oh, yes. So it is quite a lengthy process. I mean, we were told that by 11 o'clock or 11 in the morning, he'll be inside the crowd, but it seems he's still not. We don't know how long he's going to take inside this secluded spot that has been built here. I don't know how long he's going to take there because we really do not know what exactly is going to be happening. But we do know that, or rather, Prince Mngomezulu, the Prime Minister of AmaZulu, did earlier in the week say, or in a statement, say that they will be, joining the king here inside the crowd with other elder members of the royal household. You remember in the briefing that we brought you yesterday, they were seated together, so we are expecting them also to come here once the king has arrived and went into this secluded area. Once he comes out, we understand that they will be seated with him, with the king here, where then all the dancing and singing will then take place.
All right, if you could also just explain to us now, given that we don't have that visual, Bongani, I'm going to ask you to be a bit of a radio reporter at this particular stage. Just paint a picture for us of exactly what's happening there now. The visual that we have on our screen is very different to where you are inside the kraal.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a very, very huge kraal, Griselda. It's built with love, very huge love, and then in the middle of it, on the top, there is an area that has been closed off using other logs, logs and sticks, Griselda. This has been built with an entrance and exit area that you understand. There are people, as I speak with you, who are seated inside. I cannot tell you who they are because I cannot see them, but I can see, ladies, that there are people seated inside. And then on the middle of the crowd, there is a huge log, which is then the center of the crowd. And then below it, we have the regiments who are standing there, singing different hymns. And then on the top, from where I'm standing, on my left, we have women who are seated on that side, and then on the right, on my right, we have the maidens who are also seated there. And then I can also see on my right below me, there's also the regiment from the Eswatini. They're all joined together, so they're not separated, the regiment from the Zulu regiment and the Eswatini. They're all actually singing together, taking part together in this ritual of singing hymns and waiting for the king. And then we also have a huge police presence here. They have made their way to the entrance because this car has many, it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, there are more than 5, if I'm not mistaken, entrances into this car. So they have taken their position at the top entrance where we understand then the king is going to be entering. So they are preparing to build, or rather form the wall. So when he walks straight into this area that is being built for him.
And who accompanies him as he enters the kraal. I'm not sure if I missed that. Apologies, the line that we have to you is not the greatest at all.
Well, we know Prince Mngomezulu is saying that when the king, he really wanted to be part of the people who are accompanying the king, because he said it will be the senior members of the royal household who will be going with the king. He said he also hoped that he will be able to participate in the walk, but because of old age, you understand, he said he won't be able to take the walk, but he will miss the king inside the kraal. But you know that we're expecting the senior members of the royal household, or rather those, you know, who are backing the king, his ascendance to the throne, to accompany him down to this crown.
So, of course, live pictures. Stay with us there. Bongani, we're struggling to hear a bit of what you were saying, because obviously we can hear the singing inside the kraal, and definitely you will remain with us on the ground and give us the latest update. Bongani Gema telling us there that the King Misuzulu is expected, I guess, any time now to enter the kraal, and that's exactly what the process is, performing Ukungena Esibayeni ritual. This, of course, being a sacred ritual ahead of that coronation. Bongani, we're going to have to let you go. Thank you very much indeed, but we ask our viewers to stay tuned here, of course, to the SABC News channel as we continue to bring you these live pictures. We'll try to sort out a bit of our technicalities here and there. Please bear with us. I will try to give you the best coverage of what is coming out of KwaKhangelamankengane in Nongoma. And we're going to, of course, some of our other colleagues are also there, Simpiwe Makanya, who is also KwaKhangelamankengane. We're going to try and cross to him a little bit later on, but of course, if you don't know or don't understand, as most of us hadn't much prior to today, of course, we had to go through a history lesson of our own. What is happening basically is the entering of the kraal, Ukungena Esibayeni, one of the important procedures leading up to the official coronation of the AmaZulu King, is the cattle kraal entering ceremony, as I said, Ukungena Esibayeni kweSilo, a sacred rite performed in line with Zulu customs, traditionally one of the final customs before the actual coronation, not without its own challenges as well. Just another update from the High Court in Pietermaritzburg. My colleague Ayanda Mhlongo telling me that there is a possible decision that could be coming from the Judge Thomas Ncube in that particular court challenge in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Just to let you know, the AmaZulu princesses Thando Yenkosi Zulu and Ntombizo Sutu Zulu Duma filing court papers to interdict King Misuzulu KwaZulu-Natal's pre-coronation ceremony pending the outcome of the Supreme Court of Appeal application. You would recall on Friday, the Supreme Court had granted the AmaZulu Queen, Esibongile Zulu, and her daughters leave to appeal a Pietermaritzburg High Court ruling that earlier dismissed her application to half of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini's estate. So we're waiting a decision on that particular matter. My colleague Ayanda Mhlongo telling me that arguments have been presented by all the parties in that particular matter. President Cyril Ramaphosa's legal representative arguing there was no urgency in this application and saying it's a self-created urgency, and asking the court to dismiss the matter with costs. The president represented by Advocate Mwerani SC, and that of course is something that we'll also be watching here on the SABC News channel. All right, and those are still live pictures from Nongoma in KwaZulu-Natal, Ukungena Esibayeni ritual, which is currently taking place. We'll wait a decision also, lawyers for some of the applicants in the Pietermaritzburg court, also wanting the court to interdict the Premier so that no more public funds are used. So we'll certainly await an outcome on exactly how this matter in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg itself is panning out. But in case you've just joined us, these are live pictures that are coming from KwaNongoma. That's in KwaZulu-Natal, and if you don't understand what is taking place, Ukungena Esibayeni, the entering of the Kraal, Ukungena Esibayeni kweSilo, the entering of the Kraal by the king, the sacred rite performed in light with Zulu customs. Prof. Bheki Mngomezulu, I'm going to let you go. The agenda really had the privilege, and I can see on social media as well, everyone really appreciating your history lesson. I also want to thank you very much indeed for your perspective on this crucial moment, Ukungena Esibayeni kweSilo. We really do appreciate your time. We're going to let you go here on the show now.